All right, so we have come now out into the Dyer field, and we've advanced along the Dyer road, and we would be right here at this this intersection. As I say on this map, the symbols for Buell's Brigade, particularly the 13th Michigan and the 26th Ohio, they should still be passing across the gap, because as Johnson attacked, and after a few minutes, as the weight of Day's brigade and Fulton's brigade against the then deploying Martin's brigade of Davis's division, and as the Confederates lap around the end of Davis to the south, as Davis's resistance crumples, Fulton's brigade will resume its westward movement. McNair's brigade had moved forward. They actually overlapped slightly Stewart's division, and they also are going to be stopped by some of Connell's men for a short time, and McNair is going to have to fall back a little bit. But the Confederate movement further to the west will resume, and they come across the road and back into the woods in time to catch the tail end of Buell's brigade moving across the gap. Amongst the very first Federals to begin to relocate in a very fluid state are going to be the men of Buell's brigade. They're going to be struck by Johnson's advancing troops, and they're going to begin to go off, be driven off to the northwest. They're going in that way as not so much because they know that Chattanooga is up there, but that's the way the brigade was going. And if Confederates are coming here, then they're going to try to get away from the Confederates, but at the same time go in the direction that they were supposed to be going. So they're going to be pushed off in this direction. And we'll see, particularly the 13th Michigan and 26th Ohio, again a little bit later on.
Where did Stewart start out?
Well, Stewart was just right back here.
It looks like his line would have been covered, sort
of. Yes.
They were crammed in there awful tight, weren't
well, they're not just awful tight, they overlap.
they? Yeah, that's right.
Yeah. And this could be an entire, and has been, an entire separate program. The wings overlap. Just this whole situation of how Longstreet, in trying to make room on the front line for Law's division, shifts Stewart to the north, but in the process, he shifts Stewart in front of the left of Claiborne's division. And so when Claiborne attacks, and a few minutes later Stewart is sent forward in an attack, there actually is an overlap in the Confederates here, which is going to have a role in actually disrupting somewhat the potential effectiveness of Stewart's attack. Now, Stewart is also challenged because he's attacking a fortified Union position. But Stewart's formation has been challenged by this overlap with some of with Wood's brigade in particular of Claiborne's divisions. Yes, they're all mixed up there, and that
they get crossways pretty quick.
Yeah.
And that
they would.
yeah, and that breaks up command and control. Not that Wood and Bate, Brown, and Clayton probably had much chance of breaking through there, but certainly some of the casualties that they suffer is a result of this overlapping and intermingling of commands.
Well, I guess they did kind of pin them guys there.
Yeah, they do make it a little bit harder for Brannon to react to the breakthrough here, but I'm not sure the the sacrifice of the men in Brown and Bate in particular, and part of Wood, that was, you know, the way you want
as far as they got.
Yeah,
Was,
yeah.
was Stewart attacking when Brannon first got, well, after he got the orders? Then
Well,
did they start to attack him?
The Stewart attacks in the time that Joe Reynolds has told Brannon to follow Thomas's order, go to the left. I'll cover your position with by adjusting my line. Kellogg, you go tell Rosecrans what's going on and get Rosecrans to send me some troops. And before Brannon, well, some of Brannon's men start to move just a little bit, but right then Stewart attacks. Well, and actually at that moment it's not even Stewart; it's Wood's brigade, Claiborne's division, that attacks first.
There are several attempted assaults across Poe Field.
Yeah, Stewart attacked a couple times, didn't he?
Yep.
Yes. Yep. He sends 2 brigades forward, and then there's a follow-up. All of those
That was
attacks
before Wood pulled out. He attacked a couple times. Didn't he? Yeah.
Right. Yep. Yeah, his line does not overlap Brannon's, and so his attacks are entirely frontal attacks, and they get repulsed.
So he did kind of keep Brannon from.
Well, he keeps
pulling
Brannon from moving, and if someone had followed up and told Rosecrans that,
Yeah, and Rosecrans.
there would have been no hope.
Yeah.
That's a whole other debate as
Yeah.
to whether or not Longstreet still would have succeeded. But he would not have succeeded in the same way.
A walk for another day.
Yes.
Yeah, and see if I when I hit the lottery and have the money, this is all going into an elaborate GIS program where we can then calculate. Well, did Kellogg walk, trot, or gallop to Rosecrans?
So we're agreed we're all going to buy a lottery ticket for Jim and mail it to him?
Well, we're going to buy a ticket, and the winning ticket goes to but
factoring that kind of thing in is something that you have to do. You know, if Rosecrans' order to Wood, which is timed 10:45, if that 10:45 is right, and 10:45 is not actually 10:30 or 11 o'clock, but if that's 10:45, then we have to factor in that message coming from Rosecrans to Wood, but then also Rosecrans has to dictate the order to Frank Bond. Kellogg has to show up from Brannon and Reynolds, make his report, and Kellogg, or then what time did Thomas send Kellogg to get Brannon? And the time distance thing here, it takes, even at a gallop, from right here, it's going to take a little bit to get over there to Rosecrans. So.
And there is actually one more piece of this that, not to get too far into the what-if world, there are 2 Union brigades directly behind Brannon's division. They are the other 2 brigades of Van Cleve.
Yeah.
Rosecrans has ordered Crittenden to send Van Cleve's last 2 brigades, the last 2 uncommitted brigades in the Army, forward to find a spot in the line, and Crittenden says, can I go with him? And so while all this is unfolding, within probably just a couple of hundred yards, you have a Union Major General, the Corps Commander of the 21st Corps, and 2 brigades of Union infantry that, in theory, could either go to Thomas instead of Brannon or plug the hole without ever moving Wood.
Yeah, and one of them appears on this map, and that's Sam Beatty's brigade right there. They moved into this position, and John Connell doesn't even know they're there.
Yeah.
And when Connell suddenly realizes there are Confederates going beyond his right flank, and while he's being attacked in front, Connell gave the right exact orders you should as a brigade commander. he ordered his right flank to bend back, to refuse itself, to reorient facing to the south. And the men in Connell's brigade, the 82nd Indiana and the 17th Ohio, began to do exactly that. Well,
That's not good.
they do exactly that. They attempt to change front to the right on the left company to the rear, and they attempt to go back like this. And when the 82nd Indiana goes back like this, they literally run into, on top of 80's brigade, who's lying down on the ground behind them. So, yes, it's another testament to how much stress is on the Union situation at this moment.
It's a clear sign that Army headquarters, Rosecrans, and Garfield, who is attempting to plot all this, have lost a certain amount of situational awareness as to where their troops are and what they're doing. Because Van Cleve's two brigades are not accomplishing anything at the moment. They don't really have a mission. They're parked there while General Crittenden basically looks for a spot in the line where there's a gap and he can get forward and join the fight.
And where is Rosecrans and Garfield's attention focused at that moment?
The left.
Yeah, the left end of the line, and so they have become so focused up there that.
And Rosecrans is only right over there. Yeah. We're not talking about a man who's miles away from the front.
Yeah. We're not talking about Bragg.
Cole Beatty's brigade. That was Critt's guys, wasn't it?
Yeah.
Beatty.
Yeah.
But I guess he forgot they were there. Didn't know they were there to start with.
Well, Rosecrans has largely bypassed two of his corps commanders and is not using them. He could have said to Crittenden to take charge of this section of the line. He's lost situational awareness. That's just the best way to put it.
He had told in the Council of War the evening before, Thomas was going to command the left, McCook was going to command the right, and then Crittenden was going to command the reserve. And McCook is actually trying to do exactly what he is supposed to do, and he's working hard at it. Except that Rosecrans keeps changing things on him.
Pull the troops away from him.
Yep. And in most instances, McCook only learns that after the fact. And he spends so much of his morning trying to catch up with what Rosecrans has last done to his sector. So this is relative to moving Davis's division that morning. First thing, this is relative to Sheridan's division, and now for Wood, this is or for McCook, this is relative to Wood's division as well.
Colonel Emerson Opdyke of the 125th Ohio will later call this like the fatal 15 minutes. He says in that 15-minute period, the Union right is almost entirely all in motion. Everybody's moving, going somewhere.
Not talking to each other.
And if Opdyke's argument is a little overstated, he argues that if Longstreet had attacked 15 minutes sooner or 15 minutes later, this would not have happened. That's debatable.
I still think Woods would have. There's no way. That's a lot of hitting power out there.
Well, that's another topic. Because I really do want to return to Buell's brigade for a minute. Because while we're here, we should talk about what happens to Buell's brigade. They're the tail end of Wood's moving column. They have 4 regiments and their battery. The 8th Indiana Battery will move off through the woods. It will actually move through Samuel Beatty's brigade before the 82nd Indiana curves back and gets intermingled with it. They'll run over some of the prone members of the 9th Kentucky and another Indiana regiment. abrupt, that's the first clue for Sam Beatty's guys that things aren't going well when a Union artillery battery essentially drives through their ranks. And then the 100th Illinois, what's left of it under Major Hammond, and the colors, and the remaining half of the 100th Illinois will go north that way, trying to get to follow Harker. The 58th Indiana, Buell's own regiment, along with Colonel Buell, will go that way, and they will become part of the Horseshoe Ridge story. But the 26th Ohio and the 13th Michigan do something very interesting here. They form and attempt a brief counterattack into the teeth of this onrushing Confederate line. So these two regiments, they don't get very far, but they do describe an advance and then a fighting retreat. And that may have been enough to check Fulton to allow the battery to get away and allow the other half of the brigade to go north.
So where did they swing?
Now, they would have still been passing across here at the.
So they were still out.
They
here,
would have been
up
in the,
right
they would have
here.
been in the woods between us and Brotherton Field, moving north, trying to cut to this road.
But they went from column into line.
Yep, and then counterattack. How far they got, I don't know. There's one account from the 26th Ohio, a captain, I think his name is Kelly, that says they got all the way back into Brotherton Field. I don't think that's true. I think that's a little too optimistic. But they definitely do go into the teeth of that attack.
Together or separate?
Separately. Each regimental commander is acting independently, but they're doing the right thing. And then they're going to fall back as formations, shedding casualties, shedding stragglers, but they will still be tactical formations when we get up to our final stops. So it's a story we don't often get to talk about. 26th Ohio and 13th Michigan don't get a lot of press here, but I've always been impressed with what they did.
And they're part of Buell's brigade?
Yes,
But they're not fighting Brown, they're fighting Fulton.
They're fighting Fulton.
yeah, their primary
Because
opponent.
Yeah, all of this for the federal should
be,
still.
yeah, okay.
Yeah.
Should be further down, further south.
And you know, the other part of not Sunspur, let me see.
McNair?
Yeah, McNair is checked, but who's the reserve?
That's
That is Sugg, yeah. Sugg will actually curl around and be part of the outflanking line that unravels the Poe Field line.
So the 100th Illinois guys, Bartleson's guys, who were they actually? Did they engage McNair's troops or did they run into Brown's troops? Who are they?
as skirmishers.
Yeah, skirmishers.
They're in front of Bushrod Johnson.
Okay.
Because the skirmishers that had been out in front of Connell and Cruxton of Brannon, they're pushed back.
Yeah, they've
They're
been called in because there's battle lines.
Confederates attacking. So.
The two brigades or two regiments of Sugg that was moved up to the front line, did he retain control of those, or were they assigned to McNair?
Well, they're actually on the left of Fulton.
Oh, I mean Fulton.
Yeah. And Johnson does not say specifically who controlled them. And
More confusion.
I can tell you what they did on the initial part of the breakthrough is that in Brotherton Field they turned south. Major Kleber Van Zandt of the 7th Texas was in the banking business after the war, and he had reason to go to Kansas, where he had business with members of the 8th Kansas. And one day he realized he was speaking to a soldier in the 8th Kansas, and they got to talking about Chickamauga, and Van Zandt says, you know, where were you? And the Kansas guy says, I was in Brotherton Field. And Van Zandt says, well, I was in the peach orchard, the Brotherton peach orchard, which is south of the house, And so they actually turn south and are briefly part of the fight against Martin's deploying brigade. Most of the action against Martin comes from Heinman's division, but those two regiments, or at least the 7th Texas, is involved in turning to the south. And then after that, there are some command control problems, and we start to see not just the Federals shedding regiments and wandering over the battlefield, but we'll start to see Confederate regiments doing the same thing.
That will happen, then they never did make the, they just ended up floating.
No,
they will rejoin the division or the brigade later in the afternoon. But where we're specifically talking about, initially anyway, they're down there, and now they're trying to catch up.
And, okay. So,